I just published for this event a paper I prepared for the American Political Science Association called "Are U.S. Elections Legitimate? The History of Electronic Voting." Spoiler, they're not legitimate. They do not pass the fundamental test of transparency. And I say this as the person in 1994 that co-wrote the International Observer Report for the first free elections in El Salvador and edited that report and delivered it to the United Nations. If what happened in the United States would have happened in El Salvador, I would have simply written the following words: presumption of fraud, non-transparent election. Okay, look, and on my side are some real radical forces. One, James Woolsey, who co-wrote an article in the New York Times saying you can't have proprietary secret software and no ballots and call it a free election. I don't know how he arrived at that conclusion, but he may have borrowed, and let me remind you of this, in the 2016 election, if we applied the standards of the U.S. State Department and the U.S. Agency on International Development, that in 13 states, 12 of them that went for Trump, were they not U.S. states? If they were sovereign countries, the U.S. State Department would not have recognized their elections as legitimate because of the exit polls. Okay, the only reason they're legitimate is because they're in the United States, which has 50 different state standards. So keep that in mind as we talk about this. And if we go back further, let me point out who helped bring us electronic, non-transparent voting. One of the big early pushers, and this is in my paper, 1950, the Bureau of Social Science Research. It was founded as the School of Social Sciences and Public Affairs at American University. In 1953, as a nonprofit, it helped overthrow the democratic government of Mossadegh in Iran. So they're one of the forces that have long pushed electronic voting. We were using mainframe computers beginning in the 1960s to count votes. Let me refer in 1974, the U.S. General Accounting Office commissioned a year-long study on the rise of electronic voting equipment. In 1975, Roy G. Saltman, an electronics expert at the National Bureau of Standards, warned about the dangers of electronic voting. In his pamphlet, Effective Use of Computing Technology in Vote Counting, he wrote this, quote, "Increasing computerization of election-related functions may result in the loss of effective controls over these functions by responsible authorities, and that this loss of control may increase the possibility of vote fraud." And that is National Bureau of Standards Special Publication 50-30. It was repeated 3 times. Every time they came to the same conclusion. If you allow private, for-profit companies that are partisan to secretly count your votes without paper, your elections are automatically non-transparent and compromised. How difficult is that to understand? Right? We're using secret software election results by our own standards are indicating that someone, we understand maybe Russians, but what the hell with the Russians? What about the private partisan companies and their technicians that belong to the Right to Life movement, Triad in Ohio, Michael Connell, and others that are born-again Christians, Jeff Averbeck at Smart Tech? Why aren't we worried about partisan, hardcore, right-wing, right-to-lifers who believe in a moral law that's higher, that they have the right to change things, to, quote, stop abortion in America, being deeply embedded in our election system? Why is this tolerated? Okay. And I'm here to be optimistic after saying a few things. In 2012 and 2016, I would argue that, I've been lucky to be involved in the 2004 election and, of course, the suit against King Lincoln Brunsville suit against Blackwell, where we sued for 5 years and uncovered all sorts of information until Mike Connell suddenly died in a small plane crash that ended the process. I'll wrap up here in a minute, but I also sued Edison, right? The Edison Research Company, arguing in the Edison Research Company that they're working with the state. Here's the problem. When you have private exit companies that agree that how implausible the final vote count is, they're going to assume that's right. They become co-conspirators and criminal state actors. So I sued and said these people are state actors because no matter what the final vote will be, no matter how implausible it will be, they will accept the results. So we need to do investigative reporting, right? And part of that isn't hard if you've got people monitoring the Board of Elections in 88 counties, and 3 of them hit 37 and flipped the results. And then they said, well, that was just human error. What human error? It's all being transmitted by thumb drives and computer. No one is typing this stuff in. So we need to stand up, we need to do investigative research, we need to sue, and we need to create non-transparency, and we also need to occupy the machines that are flipping and take our arrest like any decent moral movement, because the system itself is fundamentally illegitimate and non-transparent. Thank you.